Hey everyone, we're Lunatrace here. I'm Chris, and we have our CEO Free.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about EPSS. So, Free, do you want to give us an intro into what EPSS is? What does it stand for? What does it do?
Sure. Yeah. So EPSS is a replacement. Replacement isn't necessarily the right word, but it's similar to CVSS, which is a vulnerability scoring system uh, designed to help people understand how bad a given vulnerability is, a CVE. Unfortunately, CVE has a lot of problems, and as I think most security people know. And we we actually took a moment to write a blog post about this, about EPSS in depth. We just wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about where our thoughts are. Why is it exciting to us? What are the things that we think it's going to actually solve for the security community? Where do we see EPSS having problems today? And I think we're going to do a quick demo just to show you, if you wanted to play with EPSS today, what resources are available.
Yeah, and the blog post kind of goes into more detail than we'll talk about in the video, but as a high level overview, EPSS brings this idea of exploitability, real world exploitability, into the world of scoring, vulnerability scoring, right? CVSS does a great job of capturing things like environmentally, contextually to your company, to your project, to your service. How likely is this vulnerability to cause an impact, right? Like, what's the risk of this vulnerability? EPSS has all of these different signals that get compiled down into an ML model and basically lets us identify what are the things that your CISO is going to care about the most, right? They come in on Monday, right, or maybe late night on a Friday, right? Like, what are the things that they're going to need to respond to because they only have so much time, right? So many vulnerabilities that really should be ever on a CISO's desk. So, what are those vulnerabilities? And EPSS takes a stab at trying to capitalize on that. So, or trying to identify those. Um, so Free. What do you think it does well? Where do you think EPSS really shines?
Well, they allude to it in this nice graph that they have on their homepage, but the reality is that for CVEs, for most vulnerabilities, CVSS is a flat, uniform score that all it measures is how bad the vulnerability is, sort of like in a vacuum. It doesn't talk about the reality um, of a vulnerability for things like if how many occurrences are there going to be of that vulnerability. Technically, under CVS or CVEs with CVSS, you could have one place where a CVE is ever used, right? It could have one server that's deployed somewhere, and that could have a 10 out of 10 CVSS score. Um, Versus you could have a CVE with a score of like 7 that's used in 10 million places, and that's going to be way, way, way worse. And it's going to be attacked and exploited significantly more. Um, but CVSS isn't going to compare that. And if you're taking a look at just the vulnerabilities by their CVSS score, you're going to think that the one that's only used in one place is the thing you should patch first. But that's really the problem that EPSS, the exploit prediction scoring system, is attempting to solve. This is attempting to actually use real world data about exploitation, incorporate it into a magical machine learning module, and then tell you from a value of 0 to 1 how bad that is, with 1 being really bad.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in many ways it kind of captures the way that um, that we as security engineers and researchers look at this space to try to determine, like, well, like, if I were to tell someone how impactful a vulnerability is, maybe you might have your gut instinct of like, well, how many services that run this language, this framework, like on this system, that the vulnerability actually be applicable to, right? And you might end up finding yourself looking for POCs on GitHub, right? So that is a dimension that's captured by EPSS because it's looking for those, right? Are there any published exploits? It's also looking at, right, do security scanners, like, do they have rules for this? right? Like in like the log for shell reaction that people had, like there was weeks where security scanners didn't have like actually published identifiers for this. So right, that's all going to be calculated by EPSS. So this is really cool. It's really exciting to look at as someone in security. Like it definitely like hits on a number of points that I've been in a number of meetings about, right? Like how do we actually identify the things that we should care about, like what vulnerabilities. So I guess Free, like what's missing from here? Like we are really excited about this, right? I know you and I are, but what is missing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing at this point is it's not an open model. You can't go and take a look at the data that it's being trained on. You can't figure out how it works. It's a model that is being trained in a black box, and the only thing available is the API that they have listed on their website. It's not an open source effort. It's available, and it's something that you can ask questions about. But it's because of seemingly the nature of the data that they're using to train it. It's not easy for them to release that data or even release the model, unfortunately. But I would say the other aspect of it that it's not quite doing, something where CVSS is still better, is figuring out contextually if a vulnerability matters. Like a vulnerability that's on the front end of your web application is going to be a very different it has a different exploitation scenario than a vulnerability on your backend server. EPSS is not currently or in the future have a way for you to contextualize that and change the score based on how you're using the code or how you're using a given CVE.
Yeah, let's take a look at the API because one thing that stood out to me is exactly how the scoring system works, and the API can sort of give us some visibility into that. So we're gonna pop up the best security scanner that's ever graced the internet, LunaTrace. And let's take a look at like a vulnerability. So here we go. This is a example project that we have, vulnerable app. VM2 has had a number of vulnerabilities disclosed. We're going to look one that has a CVSS of 10, right? So in CVSS standards, like that's like about as bad as you can get. So, or it is as bad as you can get. 10 out of 10 is perfect score. So let's take that and let's look at what EPSS tells us. So we're going to pop up the API. Let's just take an example call here. So copy that. We'll do a curl of that URL, and then I forgot I need to copy this. Copy, paste, and we'll pretty print it. So it's telling us that the EPSS score is 0.48. So what I find interesting is the score is from 0 to 1, right? So 1 being the highest, and typically how they represent it on their site is like out of a percent, right? So 0%, or 1 is 100%. So in this case, it's telling us that it's about like 50%. So it's a little bit of like a judgment call. There's not really like a concrete thing that's like, right, 50% likely to be exploitable. You kind of measure this out against other vulnerabilities to sort of see like where that falls in. So this is pretty high. We can also take a look at what Log4Shells is. We have this in our blog post, what Log4Shells turned out to be. So that really, is that right?
No, that's CVE 2021 36942.
Uh-oh.
Is that text for shell?
Yeah, oh no.
Let's go fix it. Windows LSA spoofing. Nice. I'm pretty sure Log4Shell is a 0.97. It's a CVE 2021 4422.
Oh my gosh, you have it memorized. So what is it?
2021
21
44228.
44228. Really? Free? Have you spent a lot of time looking at this?
Of course not.
So yeah, this is almost like 100%. So, right, you look online and you basically like you can't not see it, right?
You can take a look at the percentile score that they're giving you too, right? Like Log4Shell is in the 0.9997 percentile. Like there are a handful of vulnerabilities that have a higher EPSS score than that.
So
And if you
actually,
look,
I don't know what does that percentile mean. So I know
you
that this EPS
you
score.
can look at the rest of the documentation, but in general, it's if you were to look up an arbitrary CVE, like if you were to pull up one of the ones that's also in our list, um, you're gonna see like if you pull up the one in LunaTrace, like yeah, the one right above that, because we looked at this before and it's much lower score. This one, the percentile for that's going to be, I'm guessing 10%, 0.72. So this is even though it has an EPSS score of 0.014, it's still on like basically the top like quarter percentile of vulnerabilities by exploitation. Like three
Oh
quarters
wow.
of vulnerabilities have an EPSS score of less than 0.014.
Wow. So that is really showing you just how many negligible vulnerabilities there are. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, like you could say something like, as a company, we're going to patch the top 50% of vulnerabilities that we're affected by,
Right.
right? Or you could say the top 5%. You could pick some arbitrary amount given your budget, and assuming EPSS is reflective of reality, that's going to give you a maximum ROI for every hour you're spending patching bugs.
Yeah, that's true. That definitely helps cut through all of the noise that you might be
Yeah,
getting.
yeah,
So this is pretty neat. Us, like as Lunatrace, as or LunaSec security, like people, like we're excited about this. This is definitely pushing the needle forward. It has had a lot of hype. People have been talking about it. Maybe haven't quite understood what it is. We have a blog post up. There is the site that you can actually go to on first.org that talks about how it's structured. And yeah, like there's a lot of things to look forward to here. I'm curious how it's going to grow, right? Like how can we extend this model to include context of our own companies, our own security needs, but otherwise, like this is definitely the right direction, I think. What do you think, Free? Are we getting closer?
yeah. I think so. I think maybe one more iteration, maybe somebody builds an open source model that we can go and tweak, we can go play with, we can go contextualize. I think the machine learning world has learned a lot from Stable to Fusion, sort of busting the cap out of this idea of you should keep models private. Like if you want to
Yeah, yeah,
innovate,
yeah.
you got to make it open. Other people are going to fine tune that model even if they can't train it themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, let's wrap that up here. We are LunaSec, and we just talked about EPSS.
Yeah, go check out our blog post and check out our Mastodon now that the InfoSec community seems to be leaving leaving Twitter.
Oh man, I can't imagine why. Anyway,
uh,
let's head out.
have a
See
great
you.
day, everybody. Thank you.